How's it going, Grace students? Welcome back to Life Group and our series Holy Habits, where our goal is to encourage intentional communion with God. I hope you're not sick of hearing that yet. I hope you have it memorized. Let's start. I graduated from college 5 years ago now, which is kind of crazy to say, but I graduated with a degree in biblical studies, having spent 4 years studying God's Word, how to teach it, studying different specific areas of theology, and I read lots of books in college, but it wasn't until after college that I read one of the most important books of my life. I ended up taking a year off between graduating college and starting my master's degree and my residency here at the church. And for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't being forced to read things for school. Now, I like reading, but I think there's something in our nature that when we are made to do something or commanded to do something, we resist. And for the first time, I wasn't in that place anymore. So I was hungry to read things that I actually picked for myself. At one point during that year off, I don't remember exactly when or exactly why, I picked up this small book with the simple title, What is the Gospel? Now, you would think that after 4 years of Bible school, I would have a good answer to a question as simple as that, but I don't think I did at that point. And as I started reading the book, I realized that I didn't have that clear explanation, that clear answer. And over the course of those 125 pages or so, God clarified that answer in my mind and in my thinking. Now, I don't doubt that I was saved. I don't doubt that I could have taken you to important verses about the gospel or important verses about salvation or taught what that was or what that looked like. But actually having a clear, solid explanation for myself and that I could teach to others of the gospel was not there. So it changed the way I read my Bible, the way I thought about the gospel, the way I ministered to you all. And my point is, don't underestimate what God can do through a good book. Don't underestimate what God can do through a good book. I'm convinced that if you want to grow in any area of life, there are 3 things that you have to do. The first one is work hard. There's no getting around that. There's no substitute for that. It's putting things into practice. It's pushing yourself. It's challenging yourself. It's disciplining yourself. It's working hard. Number 2, you got to spend time around people who are further along in some area than you are. Right? That's why we need coaches. That's why we need parents. That's why we need teachers. You have to spend time around people who are further along than you are and learn from them. And the third thing you have to do is read good books. Now, in faith, that is still true, right? God calls us in Philippians 3 to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you. Right? So we have to work hard. We have to put these things into practice. We have to discipline ourselves for godliness, as we've been talking about. We also have to spend time around Christians who are further along than us. That's why church, life groups, and even parents, especially parents, are so important for our development as followers and disciples of Christ. And then the third thing is you have to read good books, starting first and foremost, foundationally with the Bible. Right? Charles Spurgeon might be the most famous preacher in all of history, and he said, visit many good books, I want to get this quote right, visit many good books, but live in the Bible. So if you have to choose one book to read, if you only read one book, right, desert island, if you're going to be on a desert island, you can only pick one book, that's the Bible. That's God's inspired, authoritative word. Thankfully, we have access and we have the opportunity to read many other good books, and I am completely confident and convinced that you, even as a middle school or high school student, can and should read good books at this point in your life. So for the rest of our time, I'm going to address 3 excuses people give for not reading, and then 2 tips that will help you read more. Before we do that, I want you to pause here and answer a couple of questions. Okay, 3 excuses that people give for not reading. The first one is I don't have time to read. That's the number one excuse people give for just about anything and everything, and that includes reading. They just don't have enough time. So let me just stop you right there and say, nope. That is a terrible excuse. That is not a legitimate excuse. Listen, we are all busy. You are not, let me say this lovingly, you are not unique. You are not more busy than anybody else. I now have a wife and 2 kids. I have a full-time job and a house. I'm currently renovating our master bedroom and bathroom. My wife and I refinished furniture together to make a little extra money. I'm taking classes for a master's degree, and I still make time to read. And that means books outside of classwork even. Keyword there is make. I make it a priority to read. Now, let me give you some encouragement and tell you how easy it is to read, because it might sound like you have to take a ton of time to read. It's gonna be really hard, but let me tell you this. I read an article a few years ago that said if you read for 15 minutes a day, just 15 minutes a day, every day for a year at an average speed, just a regular, average speed, you can finish 25 books that are around 300 pages in a year. Let me say that again. 15 minutes a day, every day, at an average speed, and you will finish about 25 books in a year. So I tried that at one point, and I personally found that 15 minutes a day, every day, was just a little too much. That was a little hard for me to maintain. So I just took it down to 10 minutes, and I did it 5 days a week, and that worked really, really well for me, and that's what I do now. So I now read 10 minutes a day, just five times a week, and I finish probably 10 to 15 books every year outside of books for school or for classwork. I just set a timer for 10 minutes on my phone. This is literally what I do, and I read what I can in 10 minutes, and then I'm done for the day. It's that simple. I can promise you that if you read even 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, you will get through a couple books a year, and I promise you it will change your life, it will better your life. And if you, as a middle school or high school student, can learn to do that, the Lord will bless your efforts and in ways that you can't imagine. You will learn more about life and faith and God. It will enrich your life just like it did mine a few years ago when I read that little book. That leads to reason number 2. Another excuse I hear a lot is that people don't think reading is going to make that much of a difference. They think, I have so much to do. I have to, for students, I have to do homework. I have classes. I have sports. I have music. I have friends. You're really telling me that reading a book 10 minutes a day is going to make my life better? Absolutely. I absolutely believe that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to convince you on that point, because the only way for you to be really convinced and to really know for sure that it's not worth it, or if it is worth it, is for you to actually try it. So if you want to find out, does this make a difference? Is this really worth it? You got to try it. You'll never know until you try it. So I encourage you, maybe do this for just a month. Read 5 minutes a day, 5 times a week for a month, and see if it doesn't help you in some way or make your life better in some way. The last excuse that I hear is, well, I don't know what to read. There may be some of you who genuinely want to read, you have a desire to read, but you don't want to waste time on books that aren't helpful, that aren't good, and you don't know where to start. So what do? You ask. You ask a parent, you ask a life group leader, you ask me. And guess what? I'm going to eliminate that excuse right now by giving you 5 great Christian books to read. 5 books that have been really helpful in my life, 5 books that are really popular and well known, some that have been around for 1,700 years, and I promise you that these will be helpful. And the first one is Augustine's Confessions. Augustine was a pastor and theologian who was born in 350 AD. And even though many of you may have never heard of him, he is the most influential pastor, theologian, and writer in church history. Outside of the men who actually wrote the Bible, inspired by God, Augustine is the most influential theologian and author in church history. His book, Confessions, is his best known book. It's his autobiography, and it's an amazing story of what God did in his life, and I think every Christian should read this book. It is an easy read. It is enjoyable to read this book. It was a blessing when I read this book. This again was another book that I read after college that was extremely influential in my life, in my thinking, and in my faith. One small tip when you're looking for this book, try to find an easy to read version because it's a translation. It wasn't originally written in English, so find a good translation that's easy to read. And I would encourage every single one of you to read that book. Number 2 is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Again, just about anything C.S. Lewis writes is easy to read. It's enjoyable to read. It will be instructive. It's one of the most popular Christian books in all of history. It's an excellent book, and it's kind of a good, maybe next level book that I think every single one of you would be able to read. Number 3 is The Mortification of Sin by John Owen. This is another classic and another one that you should look for an easy to read version. It says abridged and made easy to read. That's my version here. It's short. Look, it's real short. It's easy to read. It's a great book on the Christian life and on how we can kill sin in our life. So I encourage you to read that. Number 4 is Knowing God by J.I. Packer. This might be the most influential Christian book written in the last 50 years. It's a little bit longer, as you can see, but again, I'm confident that any of you could read it and you would all benefit from it. And then number 5 is What is the Gospel? The book that I referenced earlier. Again, simple, short. Any of you could read this book. It's incredibly helpful, incredibly clear, and I think it'd be great for any of you to read. My wife, and she wouldn't mind me saying this, my wife has dyslexia. That just means she's a little bit slower of a reader. She read this in one day. So I'm confident that you guys can read that and that it would be good for you and a blessing to you. To finish, I want to give you 2 tips that are just really practical, really simple, that I think will help you read. I understand that reading can feel like a chore. It can be difficult sometimes, but I think these 2 things will make it easy. And they might sound silly, they might sound overly simple, but they're things that have been really helpful to me. And the first one is to read with someone else. Read a book and discuss a few chapters with a friend each month. Find some accountability for that. Read that book together, discuss it. It will help you take that book further and deeper in your thinking and actually put into practice what you are learning. The second thing is super simple, super practical. It's something that I just learned a couple months ago, and I've been telling everybody about it because it's really changed the way I read. And it's to use a pencil or a capped pen or your finger to follow along as you read. See, our eyes actually have trouble going horizontally back and forth over and over again. They want to bounce around, they want to go up and down, and using your finger or a pencil to follow along under where you're reading helps to focus your eyes. It makes them less fatigued, and it just makes reading easier and more enjoyable. Guys, I just want to lower and eradicate any barrier to reading and to doing these things that I can, and this is one that has been really helpful to me, and I would encourage you to do. So those are 3 excuses that I've just destroyed, 2 tips that make reading easier, and 5 books that you could start reading in 2 days after Amazon delivers them. I wish I would have started reading books like this when I was in high school, so I hope you will take my word for it. I hope you would do it for yourself, and I know that the Lord will honor that, will bless you through it. Your challenge this week is to buy a book and start reading it. So I think actually buying a physical book means there's some sort of investment. You're more likely to read it than if you got it digitally. So buy a book and start reading it. Do 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and start reading a book. You can take one of these books. You can start a book maybe that you have in mind. That is your challenge for the week. I have just a couple of questions for you to finish. Thank you guys for being here, and I will talk to you next time.